Minima Cosmetica, an essay on self-aggrandizement. Ladies and gentlemen, this lecture, like everything else concerning the ecological fate of our planet, comes half a century, or perhaps a whole century, too early. Anybody who wanted to talk briefly about how a civilization with an incomparably high level of luxury consumption achieves ecological balance would have to look at accomplished, or at least solid, facts. Such facts can only be discovered by long-term observations of the sole case that will provide information about our interests. Our own case, actually. Conclusions from the past are no longer valid, because relations in the modern age are not comparable to each other. History is no longer the teacher of life. If you want to know the truth about our crisis, you will have to wait. Only a historian 3 or 4 generations from today who looks at the eco-dramas of the late 20th and the 21st centuries would be able to see the material that would qualify him or her to make valid judgments. He or she could look back on the turbulence that the future represents to us like a mass of problems that had been dealt with. He or she could benefit from the methodical advantage that our riddles will have become their systems of rules, and our expectations will have become their established facts. By the way, in using the male and female pronouns in this rather odd, parallel fashion, I am referring to the inexorable sexual dualism of the future sciences of history and social studies. One of the side effects of emancipatory progress, however delayed it may be, is that it also puts women in a dubious ecological situation. Tomorrow's research into the past will illuminate everything we were able to produce today, by means of the environment and cosmetics, and expose it merely as a demonstration of our incorrigibly brilliant recklessness. In the face of the truth to come in 100 years, anybody who behaves as if he or she would already speak the truth would undoubtedly be, well, what? A charlatan? An illusionist? A confidence trickster? A rainmaker? A pied piper? A card sharp? At this point we could list all the many words for trickery and cheating, but would still not exist what there is to say about how our claims for the future lack real seriousness. But perhaps premature concern about future truths has a different meaning. There are strong indications that the meaning of truth is undergoing a major change in the logical budget of our civilization, a change that requires us to take increasing responsibility for the facts that have not yet been established. If we are concerned 100 years too early with things for which we have no proof, this may be an indication that yesterday's charlatanry is about to become tomorrow's seriousness. People today will increasingly be drawn into a type of futurized practice that forces them to worry about the facts before they appear. To the extent that this is true, we have reason to pay attention to a transformation in traditional mental attitudes. To be brief, I will summarize this transformation in 3 sweeping statements that are part of a diagnosis of our times. First, insofar as we are sufficiently involved in contemporary life, we are living at the peak of a reorganization of our logical budget, from the primacy of the past to the primacy of the future. Second, in future, the interest in truth will not be able to be expressed mainly as history, in the sense that history asks how it really was, nor as philosophy, in the sense that philosophy asks which origins and principles actually give rise to that which exists. Instead, it will take the form of prognosis and prophecy, to the extent that this sees things coming that must come, and invokes what should come if things are done correctly. Third, we are participating in a broad horizontal transformation from passive to active promotion of prophecies. In some situations, we stop reacting to warnings and predictions with suffering, and instead we start creating our own facts to fit the fictions and projects we prefer. If this theory could be firmed up, however, it would not imply that we were unconcerned about the perspective of the historian 100 years from now. On the contrary, the historian of the future will sit in judgment on the prophetic activities of the present, and the truth that intelligence will find when it looks back in 100 years' time will also pass judgment on our predictive activities. The proposition we advanced at the beginning still holds. If it were a matter of providing cogent truths in the sense of retrospective assessments, we would indeed be arriving too early. We are coming in time to realise what doing history means for the future. It means using active prophecy to gather the material that will be available to future historians. Nonetheless, we have been warned that anything we do and say from now can be used against us before the court of the future. In the dark decade after the end of the Second World War, a dictum circulated in the Western Hemisphere that human beings were condemned to freedom. It was one of the theses that would become both classic and inapt over the course of a few decades. The author of this theorem, Jean-Paul Sartre, succeeded in making it the hallmark of existentialism. The phrase may not have epitomised his times, but it certainly captured their mood. The basic tone of the decade was a sense of bottomlessness that people at the time called the absurd. Existence was pervaded by a kind of cheap tragedy. Those who were alive had experienced fragmentation. Those who had escaped felt the chance nature of their survival in every gesture. What still existed stood around like remains, surrounded by annihilation and empty spaces. Those who had survived felt their existence outlined more sharply, as if an invisible hand had drawn a black line around their own life. The abrupt absence of 40 million people who had died vibrated in the atmosphere like a mystical emission. Some of the more sensitive survivors expressed the feeling that a lifetime was only a loan from those who had vanished. It took a long time for the cloud of absurdity to dissolve. By the late 50s, however, slogans of reconstruction were increasingly being taken up. A new kind of solidity developed. People talked of the new realism. Positivists of all nations united to come down to earth and face facts. And in the 60s we saw the banners waving for overconsumption. It created the backdrop for new risks and new forms of security related to democracy and unchecked industrial growth. Both democracy and growth optimism encountered irritating opposition from neo-utopianism and the moral impatience of young Western academics. Then an odd concept appeared on the horizon: quality of life. Anybody who remembers the time when this was a new expression will be unable to suppress a smile. The word floated above the capitalist political parties like a zeppelin over a fairground. It was as if politicians had discovered how to put pie in the sky in their electorates' letterboxes. Well, this is all history now. It is lecturing, to paraphrase Thomas Mann, in the grammatical sense of the deepest past. What was completely broken back then? It seems to me as if Herbert Marcuse simultaneously became the contemporary of Plato, St. Paul, and Spartacus. Adorno was immersed in endless conversation about the prophet Jeremiah. Mao Zedong's shadow joined the circle around Tamburlaine and Cortez, and Simone de Beauvoir and Gala Placidia discovered traces of mutual sympathy. Such dreamy conjectures may confirm the impression that the past has lost all its dimensions and collapsed into a single point, as it were. Only a few people still alive now can remember the time when existence seemed to flow out from the depths of time like a wide, peaceful stream. Nowadays, the weeks behind us quickly turn into jet trails that dissolve into unreality in seconds. Years are like garbage bags collected on New Year's Eve. How undignified elapsed time became, as if the concept of waste included the consumed present. A new zeitgeist took shape, a spirit of destruction that was presaged through signals from the 1970s on has been within our grasp since the 1980s, and can be verified by huge numbers of personal statements. This spirit, too, is full of the sense of bottomlessness, but not the same as the one that produced the absurdity of the 1950s. Today it has a different shade. In short, aestheticism has overwritten absurdity. Not decision, but experience is the key word of our times. People today do not dream of making their own choices without any reason, as people did in the general drabness of post-war life. Today's great opportunity comes from consuming oneself without reason. We do not feel the empty space gaping around us, and as if all institutions were built on sand, because the dead appeared in the majority, as after the war. No, we have become unrestrained because the world as a list of options makes us feel dizzy. We are bottomless because we have to choose between 14 different types of salad dressing. The world is a menu, and we have to consume and not be doubtful. This is the basis of the postmodern condition. You only have one life, so fill your plate, eat yourself up. Don't leave anything of yourself. The leftovers will end up in a plastic sack anyway. We drift on an ocean of appetite. Our readiness for experience has removed the world's borders. Although the last conservatives, both Stoics and Christians, have preserved the remnants of faith in the spirit of serious missions and objective tasks, the broad majorities have long since converted to the consumerist unbeliever international, to paraphrase a remark by the English cultural historian Ernest Gellner. In his capacity as a consumer, the human being of the new millennium perceives his position in bottomless existence. He is no longer condemned to freedom, but to frivolity. The frivolous person is someone who must decide for one thing or another without a serious reason. It is the dove green and not the crimson, the salmon teriyaki and not the lamb shanks, the Seychelles and not Acapulco. It is Naomi and not Vanessa, the bad boys, not Depeche Mode, the biggies from Honda, not BMW, Long Island, not Bogenhausen. To know that one will die and to summon the energy to wear not silk, but cool, simple, striped cotton. That demands greatness, and that is precisely what the members of our generation tacitly possess. In lucid moments we are shocked by our own capacity for decision-making. The roots of this recent decisiveness are actually not to be found in high-energy will to power, as impassioned Nietzsche followers would have liked to believe. In fact, they come from small, unstable differences in tension. We could call the regulatory principle the will to have fun. If we understand fun as the principle of elimination of small and tiny quantities of tension. At the same time, what we call the will to have fun is not an expression of will in the conventional sense, because in the culture of fun, the traditional image of human beings who are able to will something has become obsolete. Fun was not, and is not, a principle that takes itself seriously. There is nothing at its core that insists on basic principles. The ability to evacuate positions is the defining characteristic of people who want fun. Frivolity is the aura of a world situation in which the great mass of everyday ways of behaving is justified for one reason: for fun. A justification that is a weak difference, a small gap. We could add a sweeping, almost inappropriate generalization that the system of frivolity hovers over a principle whose basis is minimally sufficient. Options, moods, and preferences must be sufficient to give the details their established place in being. We could be tempted to think that from a philosophical viewpoint we are dealing with an order of weak reasons. If the world is an embodiment of options, it follows that its inhabitants are concerned with making decisions based on attitudes close to indifference, and with turning decisions into visible behaviour. Ladies and gentlemen, I am deliberately linking these remarks on the postmodern system of frivolity to the ideas I shall now consider. Perhaps they can help to articulate an aspect of the dilemma about today's specific topic: cosmetics and environmental crisis. It is easy to see that this configuration combines things of unequal value, or puts things of different weights on the same scale. There is no doubt that cosmetics, together with everything involved in today's beauty industry, is the leading phenomenon of the world of weak reasons I mentioned earlier in terms of the reality of options. There is also no doubt that the present environmental crisis signifies a system of serious reasons in the background of the optional, frivolous designs of reality. We suspect, at least, that this system of reasons has not stopped existing. The easy things are trying too directly to join up with the difficult things. The system of unserious things wants to link up with ecology, which means the logical centre of knowledge about serious things. This cannot be achieved directly. The present author knows no method for solving this dilemma. To track down the solution to the riddle that has been set, we either need paranormal forces or have to be prepared for a complicated investigation. There is much to be said, of course, for the first option. The present author still remembers a memorable incident that occurred in an Austrian spa, Bad Aussee, in September 1993. This was the place where, owing to human error, which is the legal term for frivolity, a green mamba escaped from its vivarium during a show with exotic snakes in a spa hotel. This is an extremely poisonous snake that enthusiasts regard as one of the most beautiful creatures in the snake world. It vanished under the parquet flooring in the corner of the room and could not be found for several days. The little world of Bad Aussee was in turmoil, and thanks to the media coverage, half of Austria was gripped by mamba fever. Police and firefighters arrived at the scene, tore up the parquet flooring and dug into the walls. Sections of the National Army were deployed. Snipers with shotguns secured large areas of the town, and we may be sure that worried fathers within a radius of 50, 70, 100 kilometres went around their houses on tiptoe, attacking anything sliding, hissing, green, or lethal. The local population sent in around 1,000 tips on how to capture the snake. The majority of the advice, incidentally, came from the occult quarter, a fact that throws the incident into sharp relief in terms of social theory. One could have no more illusions about the methodical awareness of Central Europeans in the period before the transition to the third millennium. The era of transpragmatism has dawned. Anyone who achieves anything is right. The hunt ended on the third day. The creature was found approximately where it had been last seen, somewhere under the floor that had been removed in the meantime. The punchline of this happy rediscovery was yet to come. The Austrian public TV channel, ORF, interviewed a diviner who laid claim to the success in the snake hunt. I've never forgotten what the man said about his methods. He explained that the hunt had taken a long time because he had not seen the animal personally beforehand, and he said that meant he could not make any direct mental contact with it, and that left only indirect methods. The green mamba's owner had to concentrate on the snake, or as people in such circles say, he had to get mentally attuned to it. Then the diviner, in turn, concentrated on the snake's owner and got mentally attuned to him and could eventually localize the snake using his inner impressions. As the public could see, this procedure was soon successful. The green creature was back in its vivarium again, and its owner had to bear the costs of the action. Destroyed flooring, dismantled wall panellings, daily expenses for security officers, early departures and loss of bookings for the Bad Aussee hotel business. All these are circumstances that qualify Austria as an advanced, high-risk society. The present author admits that while working on this study he was forced to think more than once about the diviner from Bad Aussee. He was plagued by the dismal thought that the diviner was not morally worse off than he was when it came to investigating the ecological opportunities of a civilization of luxury consumers. I can imagine the mental chain extended by a few links like this. The diviner mentally attunes to Karl Lagerfeld. Karl Lagerfeld mentally attunes to Claudia Schiffer. Claudia Schiffer mentally attunes to her makeup artist. The latter mentally attunes to the head chemist of the cosmetics firm, Schwarzkopf, and he or she is mentally attuned anyway to cosmetics in the area of debate between aesthetics and ecology. In our analogy, he or she would be the person who knows the green mamba personally. If all goes to plan, we should be able to announce a model solution within a very reasonable deadline. Unfortunately, the present author is not very good at dealing with media in general, and diviner-type media in particular. Philosophy, it seems, is not yet the best preparation for the challenges of our times. Anyone who has studied the works of Plato and Adorno is fighting a losing battle. He or she comes up with solutions without asking themselves how and why. Success doesn't care how you achieve it. What you are about to hear are approaches to the transitory subject, that have been arrived at by completely conventional means. Attempts to get closer to the present-day problem using detours in the history of ideas. Given the nature of the subject, digressions into philosophy of religion will be inevitable. I will confine my remarks to 4 relatively short sections. The first section reflects on the ancient European idea that human beings are creatures distinguished by irredeemable deficiency, including the idea of original sin. The second section looks at the methods sinners use to make the consequences of the deficit seem bearable, including the dual ideas of purgatory and indulgences as a retrospective purification procedure for persistent offenders. The third section considers the motif of ecological misanthropy, which can be regarded as the return of radical punishment for sins under non-religious auspices, followed by possible ways and means to evade the prophetic environmental economy. The fourth and last section deals with the possible psycho-ecological function of optimism.